My name is Mark, and I'd like to show you how to create your own little animated scene and get up and running in Adobe Animate. We'll start by using the drawing tools. We'll create our own little images from scratch. We'll create and learn about graphic symbols and movie clip symbols. Learn about how to animate on the timeline, add motion guides, do frame-by-frame animation, import bitmaps, and more. Welcome to the Getting Started series with Adobe Animate. Before we actually begin creating some cool stuff, I'd like to show you how to use the Workspace in Animate. So why don't we start by opening a brand new project. I'm in the web section, and I'm just going to open up this little preset. It's 640 by 480. You'll see it's highlighted with blue, and I'll press Create. So now I'm inside of Animate, and you can see the Workspace. The Workspace is basically how the panels, the tools, and my timeline are all laid out on the screen. And right now, if you're brand new to Animate and you've just opened the application, your Workspace is probably exactly the same as mine. However, this can be changed. So for instance, you'll see every single panel has this little teeny double arrow here to expand the panels. If I click, it expands the panels out. If I click again, it collapses them to icons. I can also click and drag so that the icons now have their names, and that can be my Workspace, and I can just click as I need the panel, the other panels go away, or I can click this little double arrow to collapse it. So you'll see every panel has this little double arrow to expand or collapse them to icons or expand the panels. I could also drag out my panels, right? So I can move them if I wanted to. I can mix them so I can have the library be underneath the properties. You'll see the little blue highlight. I let go, it snaps. Or I can drag it to the right side of the panel, blue highlight, let go, and it snaps. Or I can bring it inside so that these are sharing the same panel and just tab back and forth from one to the other. I can even close my panels, and now, oops, it's gone. I can always get them back underneath window. Of all the panels that I'll be using are here underneath window. But the easiest way to get them all back is under Workspaces. You'll see in Workspaces it shows me that I have numerous different workspaces. Here right now I'm in the Essentials workspace. But I can always reset the Essentials workspace. I click on this and it resets it exactly to the previous out-of-the-box layout. So I notice when I work with Animate, I think pretty much all of us, we start with the File menu. We open up a new file or open up a file we've already worked on. And then we have to drag all the way to the right side of the screen to grab a tool. So I like to take this whole thing from the top. Instead of each individual panel, I can grab just the very top dark bar here, right up here, this darkest part, and it grabs all of the tools, everything together, and I can drag it until the arrow, my mouse pointer, is exactly to the left, and there again is that blue highlight. I let go, and my tools snap onto the left side of the screen. Now my tool panel is a little bit big, but I can just drag this side of the panel and scale it in. All right, and now that looks better, and now I can go into the File menu and open up a new file, or open up a file that I worked on, and as soon as it opens, my tools are right here. I can select the pencil and begin to draw on the stage, making it nice and easy, quick and efficient. Again, I could always go back to Window, Workspaces to change the workspaces, or even make a new workspace. So let's go ahead and do that. New workspace. I can call this My New Space, or you can put your name in front of it and call it Jim's Space or Sally's Space. Call it whatever you like, then press OK so we can save this workspace. And now I have this space saved, which means that anytime I can go back to Window, to Workspaces, and I can go to Essentials, and now I'm back to Essentials. But I can still go to my other workspaces, Window, Workspaces, and now I have that new space, My New Space. And I click back and forth. So I could even, depending on what I'm working on, I could even go back and forth between workspaces. An easier way to change the workspace is actually right at the top of our screen. You'll see it shows me what workspace I'm in, My New Space. And if I click, I see all the other spaces. So we can go ahead and see the classic workspace to see if maybe that's how you like to set your tools up. Or we can go back to the Essentials workspace if you prefer the out-of-the-box suggested workspace. Or we can go back to now My New Space with how I like to work and how I'll be working for the rest of this series. So let's see if we can learn how to create this simple little boat for the beginning of our animation. Let's start by opening a brand new file, and I'll show you a little bit about the drawing tools and how they work. For this, we can just use any size really, but let's start with this. On the web setting, 640 by 480, I'll press Create. Animate, before it became Flash, started out as a drawing tool called Smart Sketch. And it was a neat little program. We were able to draw a circle, and you'll see if I hover over that little circle there, I can constrain it to a perfect circle, or of course I could always press the Shift key. So now if I click the selection tool, you'll see I can actually click in the center and drag it out, separating the stroke from the inside the fill. But I can always use the paint bucket to fill the stroke, or use the ink bottle to add a stroke to the fill. Pretty cool. So Animate is a vector application, and a vector is usually created with this pen tool, right? And it's created up of points, a vector shape, which is why it's small in file size, and it's also scalable. However, using this pen tool, which is the exact same pen tool from Adobe Illustrator, can sometimes be a little overwhelming, having to use these Bezier curves. Which is exactly what makes the drawing tools in Animate so unique, is that I can just drag two lines, have them touch, and bam, they're connected. And now if I hover over this corner point, you'll see it shows me this corner icon, showing me that this will move like a corner point. And if I grab over the line, you'll see I have a curved icon there, tooltip, showing me that this is gonna move like a curve. So now I'm using the Bezier curves, but just with my mouse, not having to use the actual pen tool. What's also nice about this is if I was to draw a circle, remember that perfect circle we drew, I could always delete the center, and I'm going to grab my line tool and just drag a line through the circle. Not worrying about going outside the circle. Because what's very nice about Animate and the drawing tools here is I can just click, and where it gets divided between the other segments is where it gets cut. So I can simply just click and delete. Click and delete. Click and delete, and it cuts off exactly where the lines intersect. Now I could easily, if I wanted to, come in here and fill those different segments using the paint bucket tool. So I'm just going to use 4 different colors here. And now if I wanted to, I could actually click on these lines to get rid of them, either one at a time, or if I double click the stroke, it selects all of them and I can delete. But now you'll see these all move together as a unit. Pretty neat. What I could also use is use the pencil tool. And using the pencil tool, it's usually set to ink, meaning I could just kind of draw like normal. But what I could also do is set this to smooth, which draws it a little bit smoother, tightening up the points, making my lines a little bit smoother. And lastly, I can come in here and select straighten. And what that does is now, if I draw a circle, boom, it snaps to a perfect circle. If I draw a square, snaps to a perfect square, and of course a triangle, freeform, boom, and you'll see it straightens the lines and creates a triangle for me. So let's see if we can create this boat. We're going to go in here and grab the rectangle tool, and I can either draw it like this with the center inside and then click with the arrow tool to delete, or we can start by selecting the fill and setting the fill to none. Keeping the stroke as black, I'm just going to click the rectangle tool and draw a rectangle, just like that. Now if we go back to the selection tool, I can grab the points. You'll see it's going to drag like a corner point, making the front of the boat. I can come to the side, flail this out like a curve. Maybe I can do the same thing to the inside of the boat. You'll see I can just drag it to the left or the right to move that curve a little bit. And maybe lastly, I'll bring in this corner point here. Great. So we start to have the outline of our boat. I'm going to click on this little line here, and I'm just going to either option drag or copy paste, edit copy, and then edit paste, Command C, Command V. And I'm going to drag it up here, deselect it, and then grab this point and just attach it to the front of the boat. I can grab this line and move it. This is going to be the inside of the boat. I can just move it kind of to where I think that second part of the boat should be. I'll grab a line tool and I'll drag that from here right across. You'll see they snap because I have this little magnet on, this snap to objects. So everything just snaps together. Again, I can click on this trailing garbage and press delete. And we'll grab the line tool and drag a corner into the boat, and we'll add 2 seats diagonally across with a little perspective maybe. And that's it. There's a simple way to draw in Animate. Let's quickly fill it with the paint bucket tool. Maybe I'll select this brown for the outside, and I'll choose a darker brown for the inside of the boat. And then lastly, I will maybe make the seats a bright yellow. And that's it. Drawing and Animate makes it pretty easy. Next up, we're going to create some symbols and animate our boat. So now that we have a better understanding of the drawing tools inside of Animate, let's move forward and learn about something called a symbol. So you can see right now, if I click on this boat, it's a bunch of ungrouped individual pieces of art. It's not moving together as a unit or a group. And I could just press Command G or go to Modify Group, and that would group it together. I'm going to press Command Z or Edit Undo, and then I'm going to select the boat by grabbing the marquee and selecting the entire object on the stage. Or you can just click on the keyframe, which selects the contents of everything in that frame. So now that I have the entire boat selected, I can go to the Modify window and select Convert to Symbol. So then we see the Convert to Symbol dialog box open, and we can name this symbol Boat. And you'll see that there are 3 different types of symbols. But we're just going to focus right now on the graphic symbol, which I use for any static piece of art. If I'm going to use it more than once, I'll convert it to a symbol. So I'll click OK. And now you'll see that one of the properties of a symbol is that it's a grouped object. So now I have a grouped object on the stage, which is now called an instance. And if I go under Window and open up my library, you'll see that every individual project has its own library. The library will hold the assets for every single project, your symbols, bitmaps, sounds, etc. So here we have in our library just one asset. We have our boat graphic symbol. And you'll see that now the one on the stage is called an instance. It's one instance of the actual symbol that we have in our library. So I'm going to click and drag this out to the stage. And now I have 2 instances of the boat. I'll click and drag one more. And now I have 3 instances of the boat symbol on the stage. So a symbol is a reusable object that resides in the library and you can use over and over again. So I can press Q on the keyboard to get my free transform tool and scale these down so every instance is a little bit different. I can flip it horizontal, right click, transform, flip horizontal. So my instances can be slightly different sizes, different orientation. One of the real benefits of a symbol is that it makes it easy to update your artwork and your project. So I can even have a completed project and animation on my timeline, and all I have to do is go to Window, Library. I can double click into the symbol in the library and it brings me into this editing area, which is kind of like the dressing room for our characters, where we can touch up their makeup or upgrade their art, or our actor in a play, and we knock, 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 double click, and we go into their dressing room. And you see now at the top there's a little breadcrumb trail, and it says Scene 1, which is a link that takes us back to the main stage. I can open up the library again by pressing Command L. Again, I can double click, and now I'm inside of this boat. So it's showing me that I'm off of Scene 1 inside this boat graphic symbol. So now in the symbol editing area, if I wanted to change the color of the boat, I can grab my selection tool and select any part of this boat. Because you'll see in the editing area, everything is ungrouped, making it easy to edit or update the art. So in this editing area that I like to call the dressing room for my characters or my art, or my cast, if you will, and I can click on this boat and I can just change the color. Change it to a blue, and now watch what happens when I go back to Scene 1 to the main stage. And boom, all 3 of the instances that are attached to this symbol get updated, making it really easy to update your art at any point in your animation or your project. Next, we take this symbol and animate it using motion tweening. Okay, let the fun begin. So now that we have some experience with the drawing tools in Animate, and we have experience and knowledge of what a symbol is, I think we're ready to create something called a classic tween. So I'm going to go here and click on this first keyframe and just press delete. Just remember, if I click on the keyframe, it selects the contents of everything within that keyframe. Therefore, all 3 boats are now selected. I'll press delete. And we'll drag a new instance of the boat symbol onto the stage. It's a little bit big, so we'll go to our free transform tool or press Q, and I'll scale it down from the corner while holding the shift key to constrain proportions. I'll move it to the left-hand side of the stage, and I'll name that layer boat. Alrighty, so now we have 1 keyframe. Every animation will consist of at least 2 keyframes. 1 keyframe for the starting point, and another keyframe for the ending point. So let's go ahead and maybe have this end at about 3 seconds. At the 3-second mark, I'll right-click and insert a keyframe. So now I have 2 keyframes. I have the first keyframe sitting on the left side of the stage, and every time I make a new keyframe, it copies what's in the previous keyframe. So I also have on the second keyframe the same boat at the same size on the same place of the stage. So I'll just click and drag it to the right, and maybe holding the Shift key to keep it along the exact same x-axis. So now I have keyframe number 1 on the left side of the stage, and keyframe 2 on the right side of the stage. Just setting up what I want the boat to do. Normally, they would have something called an in-between artist that would now draw all those in-between states to make the boat fluidly sail across the stage. All we have to do is click anywhere between these first 2 keyframes and right-click and select Create Classic Tween. And now if I scrub the timeline, I have the boat animating across the stage. Okay, we have a simple animation. Let's add a little background art so it's not just kind of floating through the air. I'll add a new layer. I'll call that Sky. And I've already created a bitmap and I put it in the library called Sky. We'll just drag that out into the stage. And I just took an image into Photoshop that I created. I selected a portion of the sky. I copied it, put it into a new file, made a couple of color adjustments, and then I just dragged it into the Creative Cloud library so it was available right here inside of Animate, making it pretty easy. All right, I'll drag the sky underneath the boat layer, so it's in the background there, and I'll create one more layer. We'll call this water. Then we can go grab an instance of the water symbol that I created here and drag that onto the stage. And that's just a simple rectangle with no stroke that I drew, and holding down the Option key or the Alt key on a PC, I was able to click and drag and add these little points along the way, and then just tweaking the little curve. Then I clicked on it to select it and placed it into the library by going to Modify, Convert to Symbol. Now we have the water and the boat, and maybe we'll place the boat underneath the water. So I'll grab the boat layer and I'll just sandwich it there between the water and sky. I'll press return. All right, not bad. You know what I think it needs though? If it's gonna be on water, maybe that boat needs a little bit of movement. So what I could do is select the boat layer and right click and add something called a classic motion guide. This is a way for us to draw a path that the boat can then animate on. So you'll see it creates a new layer called guide and it has an empty blank keyframe in there. And I'm just gonna click on it and I'll grab my pencil tool and I'll set that to smooth. And from about the center point here, I'm just gonna drag up and across along the waves, trying to draw a smooth line. And if not, I can always tweak it. I can always double click it to select the entire thing and use the smooth tool down here to smooth out the lines a little bit. Oh, that looks better. And then I can just select the boat and lock it onto the guide. The first frame by default is locked to the guide, so that's no problem. Let's click on the second keyframe. The second keyframe, we see the center point here, and we're just gonna drag it so that it also snaps to the guide there. And now I see that the boat is gonna be showing inside the frame here. So I might wanna grab that guide and just kind of pull it out a little bit further. And then I can select that boat keyframe again and drag it outside the frame. That way we don't see it within the stage area once we're publishing. Okay, now if I drag through the timeline, we see that the boat is going up and down now on the guide. And one of the properties of a guide is it's transparent. So when we test this movie, it'll be invisible. Okay, one more thing we could do is right now it's going up and down kind of like a merry-go-round. But with one click on the first keyframe, I can go into my properties panel and I can select something called Orient to Path. I'll click that. Now my boat is going to orient itself to the path. Oh, isn't that neat looking? And if it looks a little bit like the sailor or the boat is drunk, you have to make sure that the first keyframe of the boat is oriented to the path. So you see how the path is going up at an angle? I'm going to click on the boat and the quick transform tool, bring my cursor outside of the corners to get this little rotation tool showing up here. And then I'll just tweak it so that the boat's orientation is the same as the path. And I'll make sure that's done on the first keyframe and on the second keyframe. All right, that's pretty good. It's kind of straight. Another way is to just straighten the line and then move the boat to snap on that. And now if I scrub the timeline, then I see the boat going across the water, oriented to the path of a motion guide. So now we can preview the animation by doing a Control Test Movie or pressing Command Return on the keyboard. And there we have a motion tween of the boat on a motion guide. In the next movie, we'll learn about another type of symbol called the movie clip. So now that we created our first classic motion tween and motion guide, let's continue the flow and learn about something called a movie clip. A movie clip is a different kind of symbol. A movie clip is a symbol that has its own independent timeline that loops over and over and over again. So let's see if we can get this water to move. Right now, if you look in our properties panel, we see that this is an instance of water, which is a graphic symbol, which is great. So if I ever want to change this piece of art, I can just go into the library, update the symbol, and it'll update my entire animation. I want this to animate, and I'd like the water to flow continuously, so it's perfect for a movie clip. So I'm just gonna click on it and select it, and I'm gonna put this graphic symbol inside of a movie clip. And in Animate, it's possible, in fact, a very big part of it is putting symbols inside of symbols. So we're gonna take this graphic symbol and go to Modify, Convert to Symbol. And we're gonna call this MC_water. This will be the graphic symbol of our water, where we go to change how the water looks, or maybe what color it is. And the MC water we know is the movie clip that'll be the container for our animation. So I'll press OK. And now we have on the timeline a movie clip symbol. And I can go into the library and I can see both of my symbols. I have the water, which is a graphic symbol shown by the icon here with a circle, a square, and a triangle. And then I have my movie clip symbol, which you'll see is a gear showing this that it's continuously moving and looping. So I could double click or knock on its door to go into the dressing room of the MC Water. And we see that we're in the MC Water timeline off of scene 1. If I double click again, that's called editing in place. And now I'm inside the water symbol, which is inside of the movie clip, which is positioned on scene 1. Another way to do that is to double click right here, or right click and select edit in place. This will go into the dressing room, kind of like us knocking in the library, but we can edit in place. So we're kind of in the dressing room, as you can see here, we're inside the MC Water timeline, which is off of scene 1, but we're also able to see the boundaries of the actual stage, which is kind of dimmed out, but there for us as a guide. So let's select this water, and then we'll press Q to get us our free transform tool. And I'll just grab the width and stretch it out a little bit, and then I'll move it over to the left-hand side, keeping the water within the boundaries of the main stage. That'll be my first keyframe. I'll come down to maybe about 2 seconds, and I'll press F6, insert keyframe. This keyframe I'll drag over to the right, again, keeping the water within the boundaries of the main stage lines there, and I'll right-click in between to create a classic tween. And now the water will move from left to right. So pretty simple, it's just a basic animation, the same exact thing that we did to the boat. However, this is inside of a movie clip, which means if we go to scene 1 and play it back, we see nothing really happening. But if we test our movie by pressing Command Return or Control Enter on a PC, then we see the movie clip and the boat playing, and we see that the water is continuously looping. It's not a perfect loop, mind you, but you have an idea now of how the movie clip works. I can create one simple animation and have it loop over and over again. Now let's try adding another movie clip. This time we'll upgrade the boat and add an animated sail. So let's go to the library and double click, or knock, knock, knock to go into the dressing room of the boat. We'll go down here to where it says layer 1, we'll double click and I'll name it boat. I'll go over to the new layer icon and I'll add 2 more layers. One will be for the mast and one will be for the sail. On the mast layer, I'll select the rectangle tool, and this time I'll use the color panel to change the colors. For the stroke, I'll click and select none. For the fill, I'm going to click and select this little preset black to white gradient. Now I'll close the panel. And now with the mast layer still selected, I'm just going to draw a mast above the boat, kind of sticking out like that. And now so it looks like it fits in the boat, I'm going to zoom in, make a marquee around this little area, and then let go. And I'm just going to grab a line and select maybe red. And I'll drag that line right through alongside the boat. And it acts like a scissor. So if I use my selection tool now, I can click on the bottom part of this mast and you'll see it split it in half, and I can just simply press delete. Then I can select the line by double clicking it and press delete there. And now it looks like the mast is perfectly within the boat. I'll press Command minus to zoom out a little bit, or I can go under View, Zoom Out, Command minus. Then I'm going to select the sail layer. And again, I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I'll set the stroke to none, and I'll set the fill to maybe red. And then I'm just going to drag out the sail so it sticks out along the mast. Looks more like a flag. But we'll fix that by grabbing the selection tool and grabbing the corner and just dragging it down until it snaps to the other corner. And now we have a sail. To make it look a little bit better, we'll bring our cursor over the edge here and flare it up. Maybe on the bottom we could do the same. And now I have a sail. If we want it to animate though, we have to put it into a movie clip. So let's go ahead and do that and create a frame by frame animation. So I'll select the sail and go under Modify, Convert to Symbol. And I'll put it into a movie clip symbol straight away. I'll put it MC Sail and I'll call it a movie clip. And I'll press OK. Now we have a sail symbol within our boat symbol. And if I double click, I can edit in place. And now I'm inside of the MC Sail timeline, which is inside of the boat symbol, which is sitting in scene 1. So now we have here this sail, and I want it to move. So I'm going to zoom in on my timeline by clicking this little button here on the right. And maybe on frame 3, I'll press F6 to add a keyframe. And I'll just make some slight adjustments to my sail. Maybe it'll push in here, and this will flare a little less, and this will flare a little bit more. And you'll see now I have a difference between the frame 1 and frame 2. And then maybe I'll select frame 5 and add one more keyframe. Either right-click, insert keyframe, or press F6. And I'll make one more little tweak here, bringing the sail in, just making it slightly different than the previous frames. And now you see I have keyframe 1 sitting on the timeline for 1, 2 frames, keyframe 2 sitting on for 1, 2 frames, and keyframe 3 is sitting on there for 1 frame. So here I'll edit one more by selecting frame 5, right-clicking, and insert frame. Now all 3 keyframes are sitting on the timeline for 2 frames each. And you can see the slight animation. It's very simple. But if I press Command Enter to test the movie, we see all of the movie clips playing. And we see our sail looping independently on its own timeline in a movie clip, flailing in the wind. Hello and welcome back to my Getting Started series in Adobe Animate. If you've been following along, so far we've managed our workspace, we've learned how to use the drawing tools, created symbols, learned how to create classic tweens, and learned all about movie clips. In this video, I'd like to show us how to upgrade our artwork using the amazing, powerful gradients in Adobe Animate. I've used the gradient tools for numerous projects, from creating artwork, designing interfaces. Here's another interface design I created using the gradients in Animate. Here's the interface. I'll just show you a couple of the animations here. And here I have an animation of the motor. This whole thing was created here in Animate, drawn from scratch. And it looks 3D, but it's just the gradients that are making it look 3D like that. I also have this animation here of the pump. Again, all the gradients I've used to make this look a little more 3D. You can see it animate. So again, just all gradients. I've also used gradients here in Animate to convert a bitmap to a vector. So this top image is a bitmap. To make it smaller and scalable, I've resized it and redrew it inside of Adobe Animate using the gradients to make it look just like the original. I've done that with a lot of different graphics here. You'll see this lunch tray of food, all using the powerful gradients in Adobe Animate 2020. So let's jump in. So before we begin, I just want to change a couple of the preferences in the new Adobe Animate 2020 application. So I'd like to go under the Edit Preferences menu. For a Mac, that's Animate Preferences, Edit Preferences, or File Edit Preferences on a PC. And I just want to change the UI appearance from comfortable to compact. You'll see that it tightens up my timeline and also tightens up the tools a little bit. Next, we'll go back again, and under Preferences, we'll make this set to Expert Preferences. Again, which tightens up the ship here. And lastly, I would navigate back to my workspace that we created in our first video of the series. And now we're ready to begin. So here's our boat. You can see there's no gradients involved here. And I'm just going to jump into the library. And we're going to double click or knock, knock, knock on our boat to dump into the editing area. And I want to recolorize this using gradients. So I'm going to go up here and grab my color panel. And you'll see here it says solid color. So I'm just going to click here and select linear gradient. And now you'll see a gradient pops up at the bottom with 2 color stops. One at the left here, which is black, and the other color stop on the right, which is white. And you see when I click on them, the top of the color stop, the little triangle goes black, and it shows the color here that's selected. And I click on this little white selector, it shows me the hexadecimal code for that color, and you can see that the little top triangle is black. So we have a 2-stop gradient. If I want to add more stops or more colors in between, I could simply just click on the way and then double click any of these colors to change the color. And then I have my new gradient here. Just as easy, if I want to get rid of them, I can just click and drag and just kind of throw it away off to the bottom of the panel. And all we need is 2 right now. And I want to make a gradient using the colors that I've already selected. And if I double click here, I only have the web palette with 216 colors. It's going to be really tough for me to select the exact same brown that I have here in my boat and then a darker one. So what I do is just drag outside of this panel and select the color we already have, this brown. I'll do that again on the second stop. And now I don't have a gradient, I have a solid color. But what I can do to make it a gradient is click on the second stop, or the first, doesn't really matter. And if I change my hue, saturation, and brightness to brightness, I can then drag this slider to darken the color that I'm using, which in this case is brown. And now I have a nice gradient going from brown to dark brown. I can collapse this panel. I'll grab my paint bucket tool, and I'll just click to add the gradient to my boat. I could also click and drag to help the gradient, kind of direct it, to angle it by direction, the way I drag it, or to make it, you'll see, drag longer or wider across the boat. But I can also use the gradient transform tool, which is sandwiched right here underneath the free transform tool, or press the letter F. And the gradient transform tool is what makes this super powerful. So here, if I click inside on my gradient, you'll see now I have this little center point. This shows me where the gradient will lie, the center point of that gradient. And on the outside here, I can stretch the gradient, making it longer or shorter to fit within my boat here. At the top here, I can rotate the gradient. I'll drag the center point. Maybe I'll stretch this out a little bit. And that looks pretty good. It's light and it gets darker as the boat goes towards the front. All right, so let's do that again. I'll go under my swatches here. Again, I'll grab and double click this stop, but I'll instead grab the inside color of the boat. I'll do that again with the second stop, darken it using the brightness. There we go. I'll collapse the panel. And again, using my paint bucket tool, I will fill in these areas inside the boat. I'll go back here and grab my gradient transform tool again, and I'll click, and that one actually doesn't look so bad. And I can just click on the gradient, and maybe this I'll rotate so it gets darker going inside of the boat, make it a little smaller so that the highlight is in the top and then it gets darker as it goes inside the boat, giving it some depth. Click here again, I'll rotate this one. And one more time, scale this in, rotate it, maybe move the center point around, tighten it up so I can see the darkness at the bottom there, something like that. All right, let's move on to the seats. I'll grab this color swatch, double click, select the color that I'm already using. It makes it much easier for me to redraw this. All right, so now I have that green to green gradation, and I'll click on this second stop, and on the brightness, I will slide this down to darken out my green, which basically is just adding either black or white, right? That's what the brightness is doing. And grab my paint bucket, add the gradient, and then go get my gradient transform tool to perfect it a little bit. So I'll rotate this, and I'll scale it down a little bit. Looks like it's kind of getting darker as it goes back in time. Again, I'll rotate that, scale this in a little bit. So something like that. The last thing I like to do is maybe get rid of the stroke now. Now that we have gradients, we don't really need the stroke at the bottom here of the boat, so I'll press and delete that. The stroke to the left, I'll delete that. The stroke to the right of the boat, I'll click and delete that. Maybe I'll delete the line behind the seat, we wouldn't see that. And maybe this line here we wouldn't see. You can get rid of this one here. And then all I have left is the top edge outline of the boat, which I'm gonna click and double click actually to select all of the outlines here, the two pieces near the seat and the outline of the boat. In my properties panel, maybe I could make this little line, maybe I'll make that like 3 or 4 pixels thick. And then maybe we'll add like a light color to the top of that boat there. So something like that. And it kind of gives it like this little kind of edge, like the boat has like this highlighted edge, giving it some thickness and some depth. I'll test it again. And now you can see we have this semi-looking 3D boat using gradients in Adobe Animate. Try upgrading the sail and the water using the same exact technique. Maybe with the water you can use multiple stops to go from dark blue to lighter blue to lighter blue to a little bit of white, and maybe even alpha transparency on that white. In our last video, we upgraded our boat by learning all about the gradient tool. In this video, I'd like to show you how to create a quick little lightning effect in Photoshop, import it into Animate using Creative Cloud libraries, and then bring it all together by introducing you to color effects. So let's get started. I'm going to start in Animate. And if we're going to make lightning for our movie, we want to find out the correct size to make it. So let's go find out what stage size our movie is. We'll go under Modify, Document, or Command J. And I can see that my stage size is 640 by 480. So I just want to make sure that the lightning that I create is at least the size of your stage, no matter what size you have. I'll press OK. I'll jump into Photoshop and open a brand new file. Go to File, New. And you can follow along at home. It's just a few easy steps. And I'm going to make my stage size 700 by 500 in height. And I'll press OK. Remember, just make your file at least a little bit bigger than your stage size. And I'm going to go ahead and set the default colors here by clicking right here or pressing the letter D to set our default colors to black and white. I'm going to grab then the gradient tool here or press G, and now we have a black to white gradient. You can click over here just to double check. It says black to white. You can see it, black to white gradient. We'll press OK, and I'm going to drag the gradient from the left side to the right side of the stage. I'll then go into the filter menu, filter, render, difference clouds, and then I'm going to go under image, adjustments, invert, or press Command I, and then I'll go under image, adjustments, levels, or press Command L. And in the levels panel, I'm going to take my little gray set point here and drag it almost all the way to the right. Not quite though, you want to come back a little bit so you see the lightning and some clouds. Something like that looks pretty good. And if you don't like the way it looks, you can repeat the same steps over and over, and every single time, just like lightning, it'll become different and organic. I'll press OK. I can also now press Command U, or Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation. We can click on this little colorize button, and we can add maybe a blue hue to kind of match our sky a little bit. Something like that. And we'll press OK. All right, our lightning is finished. Next, we want to get this into Animate. And I could go into the File menu and export and save for web and then save it to a certain file and then go into Animate and import it and navigate to my file and open up and blah! But who wants to do all that? There's a better and faster way using the Creative Cloud library. So we can go under Window in Photoshop and open up our Libraries panel, which opens up the Creative Cloud library. You see I already have a folder for Animate CC. But if you don't, you can easily create new libraries by clicking on this little contextual menu and selecting Create New Library. Now to put things in the library is pretty easy. I can either drag the layer that I want right up into the library, and boom, it's now synced to my Creative Cloud libraries. Or I can grab the Move tool and drag it from the stage and drag it straight in to my library. Either way, I now have a couple pieces of lightning to use in my movie. Just as simple, if I have too many and I want to get rid of something, I can click on this and press the trash can to delete. The beauty is now I can jump into Animate, and in Animate I can go to Window and open up my CC libraries. And boom, everything I have in my library is now accessible in every single Adobe Creative Cloud application. It's wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my lightning, and I'll just simply drag it out to the stage. When I do that, this import dialog box comes up. It wants to know if I want to import this as a flattened bitmap, which I do, or if I click on this little checkbox, I can put it inside of a symbol. So let's go ahead and do that and then press OK. All right, great. And now we have the lightning sitting on our stage inside of a movie clip symbol. And we have a new layer called background sitting on the stage. It's called background because the layer in Photoshop was called background when I dragged it in to the Creative Cloud library. So let's fix that. I'll double click, I'll call this lightning, and I'll drag it underneath the boat and top of the sky. But when I do that, this layer gets guided. It gets indented and is now part of the guide. That's not what I want. So I can right click the layer and select Properties and change it from guided to a normal layer and press OK. And now it's no longer indented and it's just a normal layer. Another way I could have done that is by dragging it below the sky and then simply dragging the sky below the lightning, keeping the layer normal. All right, next, why don't we click on the lightning here and we'll open up our Align panel or press Command K and make sure this little checkbox is clicked, Align to Stage, and then we'll click over here to align it horizontally and vertically to the stage. Next, we can go into our library and see that when we imported this asset from the Creative Cloud library, it also created a folder called background.psd, and then here's the bitmap called background, and there's our new symbol called background, which again I can change to lightning just so we know what's what. And now we're ready to create this lightning effect. So first I'm going to drag this keyframe here, this first one. I'm going to drag the lightning so it doesn't start until about 45 frames or 2 seconds. So I'll have a blank keyframe in frame 1, and as I go down the timeline at about frame 45-ish, boom, the lightning strikes. Okay, so now I'd like to add the flash. So the lightning strikes and then it's followed by a white flash. At about 3 frames down, I'm going to right click and insert a keyframe. I'll click on the instance on the stage, which then updates my properties and lets me see the color effects. And I'm going to click over here and change this tint to white at 100%. You'll see the tint effect. I can add a color and add a certain percentage. Although use these sparingly because a lot of these color effects don't really work with a canvas file. But we can get away with using white and the alpha transparency. All right, so now we have white. And we'll have the white sit there for also 2 frames. And then at the 3rd frame, again, I'll add another keyframe. This time, instead of right-clicking, I could just use this new keyframe icon and click, and boom, I have a keyframe. I'll click on the keyframe, and instead of clicking on the instance on the stage, I can also just now go to the object property here in the new properties panel. And here I'll change the tint back to none. That way we see our lightning again. So we have lightning, a white flash, and then lightning again. But I want this lightning to look a little bit more organic. And I don't want to create a new lightning and import a new bitmap, but why don't we take the one we have and maybe we can transform it. We can right click it on the stage, go to transform, and maybe flip it horizontally. And now the lightning looks different. All right, and then maybe the very next frame, I'll add another keyframe. So we're making the timing a little bit different. I'll insert a keyframe, and this one again, I'll go into the object panel and I'll change the tint back to white. Alrighty, so now we have 2 frames of the lightning, 2 frames of the white flash, and then 1 frame of lightning and 1 frame of the white flash. And right here, I'll right click and insert a blank keyframe. So let's see what we have. I'll click on the play button and we can watch it play back. All right, not bad. Looks like lightning. Great, so why don't we add 1 more flash? Maybe this flash will be a little while. It'll flash twice, and then it'll pause, and then maybe right about here, and insert a keyframe. And for this, we can select keyframes we already have. We can grab the 2 frames here, the lightning, all the way to this white. All these 4 frames are selected, and I click on the Option key. I hold it down and I click and drag this lightning so it hits again at about frame 75. But again, I want it to look different, so I'm going to click on the lightning. I'm going to right click on the stage and select Transform, and this time I'm going to flip it vertically. So now it looks or appears as if we have 3 different pieces of light. We have this first one, the second one hits there, it's different, and there's now the 3rd. So let's play it back. Nice. What we could even do is have this lightning hold for 1 more frame, so it's really organic. This lightning holds for 2 frames, then lightning hits again here just for 1 frame, and maybe this one will be for 3 frames. So if I put my cursor at the top of the timeline here, I can press F5 on the keyboard to insert 1 frame. So now the lightning will sit there for 3 frames and then have a white flash. Let's see what it looks like. Perfect. Lightning is all different times. Sometimes it freezes in the sky and sometimes it's a quick flash. So now we have some organic looking lightning. All right, we have 1 more thing to do. Why don't we make it so that the sky gets darker before the lightning hits? So to do that, we'll click on the sky background here. And if I click on this on the stage, we see that it's still a bitmap. So let's convert it to a symbol. With it selected on the stage, I'll go to Modify, Convert to Symbol. And I'll call this sky. And if I press OK, it'll tell me that the sky name is already taken. So I'm just going to add a dash for now. One is called the sky as a bitmap, and one is the sky, the symbol. I'll press OK. Great. So now that our sky is a symbol, we can use these color effects. All right, so maybe at about 1 second before the lightning strikes, we can click over here and add a keyframe. Again, using the new keyframe button, Insert Keyframe. 1 click and boom, we got a keyframe. And then we'll go down the timeline, and maybe at about this point here, I'll add another keyframe. And I'll right click in between to create a classic tween. And then what I really want to do is change the tint. I would like to change the tint and make this to a dark gray tint and maybe lower the opacity. The only problem is it's not going to work with Canvas file. So I have a workaround. Why don't we set it to alpha, so we'll lower the opacity of the sky, which actually in this case is lightening the sky, not what I want. But if I turn off the visibility of the sky, you'll see that we have a white background. So why don't we go ahead and change the background and make it darker? We'll go to Modify Document, and I'll change the stage color to a dark gray. And I'll press OK. And now, if I turn the visibility back on of the sky, we see that as the alpha transparency goes down, it fades and we see the dark gray background. I'm even going to make that a little bit darker. Looks good. So now we have the sky, it fades to dark. Looks like the clouds are coming in, the lightning strikes, and then we'll repeat on the way back. So the lightning strikes, and then right about here, we'll make the sun come right back out. So with the sky layer selected, I'll add a keyframe. I'll go down the timeline here, I'll add another keyframe. I'll right click in between to add a classic tween. And I'll change the second keyframe under the object panel from alpha to none. So now it goes from a sunny day to a gloomy day, lightning hits twice. Okay, so let's test the movie and see what we have. So Houston, we have a problem. If you notice, we didn't see any of the white flashes. And that's because of the problem with the color effects with HTML5 Canvas when you export. So a little workaround we can do is you go into the library and duplicate the lightning copy I can call that. And if I swap out this symbol in the properties panel, I could swap symbol with the lightning copy. And again, I can click over here and swap the symbol with the lightning copy, there. And then one more time, click over here on the stage, swap the symbol to the lightning copy, and now I'll press Command Return. So that's it. Using two different instances solved our problem. In the next video, we'll add sound. Okay, so now that we added this lightning effect, I think now it's time to add some sound to put it all together. Okay, so let's get to it. First, why don't we start in our library? You see it's getting kind of sloppy. We have so many different assets now. So what we could do is organize it by adding here a new folder. I'll click, I'll add a new folder, and maybe I'll call this Lightning Assets. And inside of that folder, we could put in this folder, which is the original PSD, and we can put in the lightning bitmap and the copy of the lightning here. All right, maybe we can add another folder for sound. What I could do also is in my library, I like things to be organized. So you see how now I have one folder at the top and one folder near the bottom. I'm just gonna add a little underscore. So I'll do underscore sound, which pumps it right up to the top. I'll do that again for the lightning assets. Just add an underscore, press enter, and boom, now I have an organized library with the folders at the top. So we can import all types of sounds into Animate. I can import Adobe sound files, WAV files, AIF files, MP3 files, and more. But those are pretty much the popular ones that most people are using. All right, so why don't we import the sound? So I'm gonna go to File, Import, and when I import, I can either import to the stage or just to the library. So the first thing I want to do when I add sound is to add a new layer. There is no special layer or place to put sound in Animate, so it's always best to just add a new layer for every piece of sound as if it's a new audio channel. So I'm going to click here and I'll put waves. That's our first sound that we're going to import. And with keyframe 1 selected, I'll go to File, Import, Import to Stage. And when I import to the stage, it's also going to put my sound into the library. Here I'll double click the waves, MP3, And now we can see the waveform here in the first keyframe on my timeline. And we also see now that it's placed here inside the library. So I'll click on the waves and I'll drag it into the sound folder. And now we have our wave sound. Nice. So if we click on this little wave sound or the first keyframe, we can then go to the properties panel. And we can see that there's a place in the properties panel for sound. So we also could have just selected our keyframe and then dropped down from here and selected waves. So there are two types of sounds in Animate. There are event sounds and streaming sounds. Event sounds, they must download completely before they begin playing, and then they can play completely until they're stopped by either an action script or if the sound is over. And then there's streaming sounds, which we're not able to use, unfortunately, with Canvas. Stream sounds begin playing as soon as the data for that first frame has been downloaded, and then each frame is synchronized exactly to the timeline. So as it moves one frame, it plays that little bit of sound. It goes to the next frame and plays that little bit of sound. And each piece of sound is broken up into the different frames. But unfortunately, we can only use event sounds with HTML5 Canvas so that we can export and not use any kind of plugin. In this case, we only have one. It's called event, and the sound loads on the first keyframe and then plays entirely through. We could also repeat the sound if we wanted to. Repeat here, you'll see it says one time, which is enough for us, I think, for these waves, since they happen to span across about 130 frames, which is pretty much my entire animation. But if it was a longer animation, for sure, it would be great to repeat the sound a certain amount of times, or possibly loop it forever. In this case, though, we're just going to repeat one time for the sound. Okay, so we'll go back to the library, and this time I want to add and import the lightning. But I don't want to import it to the timeline since we have to place it in 3 different places where the lightning is hitting. I just want to import it to the library, and then I'll import it to the timeline as I see fit. So this time I'll go to File, Import, and instead of Command R, which is Import to Stage, I'm just going to import this straight to the library. I'll select the lightning sound and I'll double click it, and now it's imported into my library here, and I'll drag that also into my sound folder to keep everything organized. And now I'll go down to the timeline and see when the lightning hits, right about there. I'll add a new layer. I'll call it lightning. And then right about there, I'll add a keyframe. So I'll click on the new insert keyframe icon here. And there's my keyframe. I'll click on it to select it. And I'll go back to my properties panel. And this time you'll see we're in the frame section of the properties panel, and you'll see the sound section, and we can drop down and see all the sounds that we currently have in our library, which is just the lightning and the waves. And I'll select the lightning. And I'll do that again. I'll add another layer. We'll go down the timeline to see when the lightning hits once again, right there. And again, with that layer selected, I'll add a keyframe. I'll double click, call this lightning. And again, I'll click on this keyframe to select it, go back to the properties panel, and select again lightning. All right, so we have one more instance to add of lightning, and that's going to be right about here at a frame 66 for me. And another way we can do this is to duplicate the layer. So I'll right click, duplicate the sound layer of the lightning. Now we have lightning copy, and I'm just going to drag it over here to 66. So I'll click on the keyframe once and let go. I'll click and hold down and drag it over. So it starts at about frame 66. All right, there we go. We do have a little bit of trailing garbage here because the sound is overextending my timeline. So I can just click and drag, select these little layers here, and then right click, remove frames, or press Shift F5. So now our timeline is getting busy, as you see. We have 3 different layers for the audio for lightning and 1 for the waves. So maybe we can organize this as well by adding a new folder. So I'll click Add a new folder. I'll call this audio or sound. I'll drag it to the top, and I'll click on the lightning and press the Shift key on the waves layer, and I'll drag them right inside of this folder. I can collapse it. Now it's nice and neat, and I'll press Command Enter to test. Sounds great. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on sound. In the last few movies, we upgraded our boat using the Gradient Transform tool. We created lightning in Photoshop and imported it into Adobe Animate using the Adobe Creative Cloud library. And we imported some sounds to bring it all together. In this video, I'd like to add a sailor to the boat and make him wave using the Asset Warp tool and some classic tweening. So let's get started. Okay, so let's start out by going into the library, and we'll double click on our boat to go into its editing or dressing area. And we can make a new layer for our sailor. And maybe we can lock all other layers so that we don't click on them by accident. And maybe we'll start with a circle with no stroke, and we can grab some skin tone, and I'll just draw a big head. So this is going to be a very, very simple piece of art. Don't expect anything crazy. We're just going to get a character so that we could use the Asset Warp tool and add some movement. This could be done with bitmaps as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab the Move tool. I'm going to hold down the Option key, which is going to grab a point out of here, and I'll keep holding it down and add another there, and maybe one more for the mouth, and I could pull this up a little bit. And then maybe one more for a point here at the end of the mouth. All right, we'll grab an eye, we'll grab another circle, and we'll make it white. Maybe we'll add a black stroke to that. And I'll go back and change this maybe to blue, or whatever color you'd like to use. Maybe we'll get rid of the stroke this time. And then we'll add maybe one more circle for a pupil. That's black. I'll press Command plus to zoom in. Use the space bar to get the hand tool. And I'll draw a little pupil right there. All right, so we have an eye. I can select that, press Command G to group it together, and I can move it into place. Something like that. All right, maybe we can create a sailor cap. So I'll grab a rectangle, make that white, and I'll drag a little rectangle like this. Push this up and push that up, and maybe pull this sides out a little bit. And then I'll grab maybe a circle and just add a little bump on top. So you have like a sailor's hat there. All right, good enough. Again, we'll select that. I can press Command G there as well. Even though things are on the same layer, Command G will help it so that it doesn't mesh together. And I'll still be able to go ahead and move it or shrink it or scale it, etc. All right, so there's our little dude. If you want to add hair, we can always grab the brush, maybe grab some hair color, whatever color that is. And I can always use the bracket keys next to the letter P. The right bracket increases the brush size. The left bracket decreases the brush size. If you use Photoshop, it's exactly the same quick keys. And I'll just maybe just squiggle this around. And because the hat is grouped, this is going to end up underneath the hat. Boom. All right, I'll zoom back out, Command minus. I'll press the space bar to grab the hand tool here, and I grab maybe the line tool, go to properties. Maybe I'll increase that stroke size to about 3 or 4. And we could just draw a little body or how he would be situated, the little dude. He'll have a leg over this way and a leg over that way, and maybe an arm touching this side of the boat and an arm going to the other side of the boat. So just something simple. And then we can just grab the brush tool, and maybe I can grab blue for his pants. And again, grab the zoom tool, maybe zoom right in to where his pants are. Again, increasing the brush size if I want with the right bracket key next to the letter P. And I can just kind of draw in a pair of pants. Give him a little bit of a butt, waist. So this is going to be far away. It's small. It doesn't really matter that much. We can just clean up the remnants here. Maybe push this up a little bit so it looks like it's inside of the boat. And then maybe we'll grab a, white shirt. Again, pressing the space bar to move the canvas. Add a little shirt here and his arms. So something like that. Doesn't need to be perfect. Okay, we can double click the zoom tool to bring us back to 100%, which also works in Photoshop. So maybe we can zoom into the face to grab that color, and we'll grab the paintbrush. We'll click here. Instead of selecting a color from here, we'll just drag the cursor outside and use the ink dropper to select that skin color again. And now we could move over here and maybe create a hand. All right, nothing crazy, just and a wrist maybe, and then a hand here. Okay, good enough. So now that we have our character, we can zoom in. Maybe on the timeline, we'll add a bunch of frames. I'll go down to about, second and a half or 30 frames about. Maybe I'll select all of the frames, and then I could either press F5 to insert frames, or I could use this insert keyframe button. Just click and hold, and then click on the word frame to add a bunch of frames in there. So maybe I'll go to my sail layer, I'll click on that, and I'll click on the first keyframe of the sailor layer, which selects all the contents that's in that keyframe. And I can press Command G to group my art, and then I can come over here to the Asset Warp tool. This Asset Warp tool works by just clicking, and I can add pins. So let's say I wanted his arm to move. I can click on his arm, and then it turns everything into a mesh, and then I can move that arm, which actually in this case moves everything. So what I'm going to do is add a bunch of pins to lock down his body here, and I'll add one at the base of his neck, and I'll add one at the elbow, and if I want his head to move, I could even add one at his head. And now I can pull any of the points, and you see I can actually add movement to the character. So we can start his head back a little bit, and we can keep his arm down, and then maybe a few keyframes down, I'll add another keyframe here. This time I'll click and hold and select the word keyframe, and boom, I add a keyframe on the timeline. Maybe on the second keyframe, I can click on that little pin and kind of rotate it backwards a little bit. And you'll see now from the first keyframe to the second, I have a little bit of movement. Then we can go further and add another keyframe using the new Insert Keyframe button. And this time, maybe we'll pick up his arm. So we can throw his arm up there, move his elbow like he's waving hello. We can move forward once again, add another keyframe, add a little bit of movement with his hand, maybe go a little bit further, add one more keyframe. Maybe this time his hand goes back, and then we can add maybe some more frames in here. Again, clicking and holding, adding a frame. And then over here, maybe we can add one more last keyframe and putting his hand back down on the boat. Something like that. All right. So it's a very simple animation. And what's nice is that now we can actually select all of these frames and right click and add a classic tween. And that'll smooth out the motion between all the keyframes that we just created. And that's it. I'll press Command Return to test the movie. And you can see how easy it is to create movement and animation using the Asset Warp tool in Adobe Animate. I'd like to show you how to add some organic and dynamic movement to your animations using easing in and easing out. So up until now, all the animations that we created using classic tweens have been linear. In other words, they've been moving at the exact same pace during the entire animation. Let me give you an example so you get the idea of easing. So now I have a linear animation of a ball moving up and down. To show you the difference, let's make a copy of this. I'll double click and call this ball. I'll make a new layer, and then I'll hold down the Command key on my keyboard, and I'm going to click and drag across to select this entire tween of animation. And then I will hold down the Option key and click and drag to get a copy of this animation. I'll lock the first one we did, and I'm going to go over here and use something called Edit Multiple Frames, which is a way for us to edit an entire piece of animation or just a portion of it. So I'm going to select everything. Or I could click over here and say select all frames. And then I'm going to press Command A, which is select all. And holding the Shift key, I'll press the right arrow and push this other ball across the stage. Okay, I'll turn off Edit Multiple Frames by clicking here. And I'll play this back so you can see that I have the exact same animation in both spots. All right, so let's take the one on the right and see if we can add some movement to it. If this is a real bouncing ball, it would actually pick up speed as it fell to the ground. So let's see if we can make that happen. If I click on the very first keyframe, on the Properties panel, you'll see I have something called tweening. And underneath that, you'll see ease and effects. And really, no ease and classic ease at this point are the exact same thing because my line is exactly straight. It's a linear animation. Let's just start here with ease in or ease out. Ease in, which means the animation will start out slowly. It'll slowly animate in, and then it'll speed up on the way out. You'll see it in the graph, it slowly starts, the curve, and then it quickly picks up speed as it goes to the end. So let's give it a shot. So we do the ease in quad, which is a preset ease. I'll double click, and I'll play it back. So notice how both balls touch the ground at the same time, but the one on the right has easing applied, and it starts off slowly, and then it catches up, looking more like a ball bouncing. We'll do it again on the second keyframe. When the ball bounced up, it would bounce up quickly and it would slow down as it reached the top. So we'll come over here and click. This would be an ease out, right? We'd want it to slow down as it went to the end or the out part of the animation. I'll double click the word quad and I'll press Command Enter so we can test our movie and see it looping. So you see the ball on the left is just going up and down, kind of like Pong. Linear format, the pacing is exactly the same. But the one on the right has some dynamic movement to it. It falls down quicker and slows down as it goes up. And it looks sort of like a bouncing ball. We're just missing the little squash and stretch at the bottom. But you get the idea. All right, so let's close this. So why don't we jump back into our movie and create a very simple bird to apply these easing properties. First, maybe we'll clean up our timeline a bit. I'll click to add a new folder. I'll call that audio, and I'll click on the first layer of lightning, hold down the Shift key and click on the wave, select all four, and just drag and drop them into the audio folder and collapse it with this triangle, reducing the clutter on the timeline. Next, maybe I should lock all of the layers so that I don't move anything accidentally, and I'll add a new layer for our bird. Just gonna make something simple. So maybe I use the line tool, I'm using gray or a dark gray or something, and I'm just gonna click and drag a straight line. Very simple. I'm gonna move back to the move tool. I'm gonna hold down the Command key to click and add a point here. And I'll click and drag these up to add a little curve. And then maybe I'll click and drag the wings so that they're a little higher in the start position. Something like that. Okay, I'll double click it to select both lines and I'll convert it to a symbol by pressing F8. I'll call that bird. And the movie clip is fine, so I'll just press OK. All right, so now we have our bird. Maybe I'll have that bird start at about frame 15, so I can just click on it and drag it in, right? So there's nothing happening and the boat comes out and then the bird flies in. And then maybe I'll have the bird go to about 3 seconds. I'll click on the Insert Keyframe button and add a keyframe. And then maybe here I can click and hold and add a blank keyframe so that the bird is gone by that point on this timeline. Okay, I can right click now if I want and create a classic tween. We can create the tween either before the movement or after the positioning of the keyframes. So here I'll click on the first keyframe, I'll press Q to get the free transform tool here. And I'll press the shift key to hold and constrain proportions of my bird. And maybe I'll bring the cursor to the outside to rotate the bird. Maybe position it on the right hand side. Okay, we'll move down the timeline on the second keyframe. Maybe I'll press shift and drag and make it as small as possible so the bird is going off into the distance. And then I'll grab my move tool and position it up in here at the top of the clouds. Using the spacebar to get my hand tool to move the canvas, and I'll just drag it up there. Either go into the library or just double click to edit in place, and maybe we can add a little animation to this bird. Okay, so maybe at about frame 10, we can add another keyframe here. That way the first keyframe and the last keyframe are the same. And maybe in the middle, I'll add one more keyframe, and that's when we'll add a change. I'll select the bird, I'll move him up a little bit, and I'll just take his wings down to make them flap. All right, so very simple, right? And then if we wanted to, we could add a quick shape tween, which is a way to morph shapes together. We'll get to that in a different video. But for now, there's a quick bird. We can press Command Enter to test it out. Okay, so it's simple, it's not great, but let's see if we can incorporate easing, which is the entire point of this tutorial. So as the bird flies past us, it would appear quicker, right? But like a plane in the distance appears like it's flying very slowly. So this bird, as it goes into the distance, we should probably slow it down and slow down its path. So if we click on the very first keyframe, we can come over here to our properties panel and click on Classic Ease, and we want this to ease out. Right? So as it flies away, it eases out. And you can clearly see that with the graph here. It's starting high and then it slowly eases out. We have a bunch of presets in here. So cubic, you'll see, just eases out more. So it starts off even faster and then slows down. Quart starts off even quicker and then really slows down. And quint, same thing. So this is all just a bunch of presets that you can play with. Let's try quint for right now. That means it's going to go really fast and then really slow down near the end. It might be too exaggerated, but we'll give it a shot. Double click, Command Enter to test. And now you can see the bird flying in really, really fast and kind of hovering, easing out as it goes towards that second keyframe. Perhaps even sitting there a little bit too long. So we can go back into Animate. And maybe we can click on that first keyframe and come here and maybe change this to just a normal quad. So it doesn't go as fast in the beginning, but still eases out and slows down near the end. Just not as exaggerated. Maybe add one more layer. Press the Command key as we click and drag across this entire sequence of animation, the entire tween, including the blank keyframe. We can then press the Option key as we click and drag and stair step this animation so it starts a few frames behind the other. Then I'll press Command Enter so we can test our movie and see it looping. And now we have two birds flying in and easing out. So play around with all these different presets of easing in and easing out. In some animations, like with character animation, you might want to do an ease in and ease out. So that it starts off slow, kind of goes at a normal pace, and then slows down as it stops or enters its final position. There's also custom eases. So I can create a new ease and double click to edit and make my own graph of how much easing in or easing out that I want to add to my animations. I can save this and apply, and then of course I could use this over and over under custom eases. I think an ease should be used with almost every animation. Give it a try. I hope this helped. Hi, and welcome back to the Adobe Animate Getting Started series. In this video, I'd like to talk about the difference between a movie clip symbol and a graphic symbol. So a symbol is a reusable object that's easy to update. So right now I have two symbols on the stage. They're really both the exact same symbol, and I just pressed the Option key and moved it over to make a copy. And inside of them, if I double click, in the graphic symbol I have the exact same 40 frame animation, and inside the movie clip, because they're duplicates, I have the exact same timeline and animation. So you can see now they're both the same exact instance of MC Ball and their movie clips. But I'm going to click on this movie clip here, and I'm going to change its behavior from a movie clip to a graphic symbol. Every symbol has its own timeline. Every symbol is reusable and will be in the library. And I can easily change the behavior of any symbol I want to go from a graphic to a movie clip. So here I have a floor. And let's just say this movie clip, I just placed it in there and I wanted it to bounce on the floor. Well, movie clips I cannot see play in the authoring environment. But you'll see a graphic symbol I can see play. So to line this up, I can click on the movie clip. I can temporarily change its behavior to a graphic symbol. And then you'll see as I scrub the timeline, it'll sync with the main timeline. When it gets down to the bottom, I could just click right here and move the entire symbol down until it's touching the floor. And then I could just change the behavior back to a movie clip. A movie clip loops independently of the main timeline, regardless of what's happening on the main timeline. Whereas the graphic symbol is linked to the main timeline. If I move one frame forward on the main timeline, I'll move one frame forward on the graphic. If I move 2 frames forward, the graphic will move 2 frames. If I go to the end of the timeline and stop, the graphic behavior will stop. So the movie clip does not play in the authoring environment, but the graphic symbol does. Because the movie clip is looping independently on its own timeline, and I need to press Command-Enter to test that out, whereas the graphic symbol is synced to the main timeline. So right now, if I tested the movie, we would see 2 bouncing balls looping over and over again. Because in test mode, it always loops. I made a new layer here called Actions. And at the last layer, I'm going to click and I'm going to press F9 to open up my Actions panel. And I'm just going to add a stop action. And then I'll test the movie. So now what's going to happen is I'm going to get to the end of this timeline and the main timeline will stop. And we can see the difference between the movie clip and the graphic symbol. So the movie clip loops independently, regardless of what's happening on the main timeline, which on the main timeline we've stopped. And the graphic symbol moves in sync with the main timeline. So the main timeline has stopped, the graphic symbol has stopped. If the main timeline only has 20 frames, then we will only see 20 frames of that graphic symbol animation. Some other differences between the graphic symbol and the movie clip. The graphic symbol has 3 different choices for looping. I could either loop, which means it'll loop over and over again. So if I want this ball to bounce twice, I'd have to show it on the timeline for about 80 frames, right? We have 40 frames to our animation. So if I show it for 80 frames, I will then see the ball bouncing twice. I could also loop the ball from any frame I want. So what if I wanted this ball to start at frame 20? I'll press Command Return to test the movie. You'll see that it starts from the bottom. And of course, then it stops. So I can use this graphic symbol to create some more variety in my animation. So if I press the Option key down and I click and drag, I can duplicate this symbol, make a copy of it. And now I have 3, and you'll see the first one is starting from the first frame. And I could have the second one start, let's say, from the 10th frame, and click on the third one and have that one start from frame 20. And now you'll see that they would all start at different points, and I'd have some variety in my animations. So the graphic symbol I could be set to looping from whatever frame that I like, or I could set it just to play once from whatever frame I'd like. I could have it loop just once, which means if it's on the timeline for more than 40 frames, I'll still only see it play one time. And lastly, I could also have it be a single frame. So I could have it sit there at frame 1 or at frame 17. Another difference between a movie clip and a graphic symbol, the movie clip symbol has an instance name, which means I can name it and speak to it and control it via ActionScript. With a graphic symbol, I cannot. So if I add a couple of buttons here, one to start and one to stop, I can give the movie clip an instance name. I'll call it ball_MC for movie clip. And I've already added a bunch of ActionScript to actually talk to the movie clips. Tell the ball to stop, to play, or to even move or scale, or anything you can think of. I can change all of its properties via ActionScript. So I'm just gonna press Command Return. I click on Stop, and it stops the movie clip. I click on Start, and it starts the movie clip. So with actions, the movie clip is a pretty powerful symbol, and the most dominant symbol in Adobe Animate. In this video, I'd like to introduce you to something called shape tween. A shape tween is different than a motion tween. A shape tween consists of 2 ungrouped objects. It's like 2 vectors morphing together, as you can see here with this box opening, and the water in the fish tank moving around, and the transition from the curtains to the faces here, the transition of this rectangle on the computer screen, and the plants waving in the fish tank. So for a shape tween, I need 2 ungrouped objects. So I'm going to go over here to the tool panel and grab the Polystar tool. I'm going to scroll down to the properties panel and I'm going to change polygon to star. And you see here I have the number of sides is 5. That's perfect. And I'll click and drag, and now I have a star here on my stage. So that's keyframe number 1, and you can tell it's an ungrouped object because I can click and drag it like that. If it was grouped together, it would move as a unit, right? I can't just tweak different pieces of it. So I'll go down the timeline to maybe about frame 15 or so, and I'm going to click and add a blank keyframe. And then I'll grab some text, and I'll just type shape tween, and I'll move that to the center, maybe scale it up a little bit. And as you can see, the text is not ungrouped. It clearly has a blue border around it. So if I was going to go ahead and right click here to add a shape tween, you'll see here I get what's called a broken tween. It's all dashed, as opposed to having a straight line going across showing the tweening from one keyframe to another. So to fix that, I can just click and you'll see this is clearly a grouped object with the blue border around it. So I can go up to Modify, Break Apart, or press Command B. So Break Apart has now broken apart my text from each other, which is a great way to do some text animation. However, if you look carefully, it still has a blue bounding box around it. So all of these are still grouped, therefore the tween is still broken. I'll select all the pieces of text once again, and I'll go to Modify, Break Apart, or Command B. And now clearly you can see that these are ungrouped objects and they're editable. And now the tween has a straight arrow going from the left keyframe to the right keyframe. I'll press return and we see our shape tween tweening from one object to another. The problem is with these shape tweens is we don't always have the most control. So let me give you an example. I'll delete this, I'll make a new layer, and I'll grab a rectangle here. Okay, then I'll make another layer. And I'll call this bottom of card, and I'll make another layer, and this will be the top. And I'm just going to grab this keyframe here, I'll press the Command key and select this whole sequence, and I'll press the Option key and click and drag to make a copy. And I'll change the color of the top of the card to say blue. And let's say I wanted this card to open up, or a door. And let's say I want this keyframe to end up over here, as if the door, or the card in this case, opened up. And I wanted to have a little perspective. So I wanted something like that, go from right, having the card open from left to right. Let's see what happens if we add a shape tween here. We do have two ungrouped objects, ungrouped object in keyframe 1 and an ungrouped object in keyframe 2. You can tell because I can see the pixels as opposed to a blue bounding box. And I'll right click in between and create a shape tween. We see the arrow is straight across, so it's not broken, and I press play. It's not really opening, right? It's just moving to the side. So interesting animation, but not what I'm looking for. So what I could do with shape tweening is use something called shape hints. So I'm going to go ahead and select the first keyframe. When using shape hints, the first keyframe must be selected. So now that the first keyframe is selected, I'm going to go up to Modify, Shape, and add a shape hint. And this little circle comes up, showing me that this is my first shape hint. If you look at this carefully, the point on the right-hand side of the card is pivoting to the center. And really, I want this corner to stay the same. So I want this top left-hand corner to stay right there even when it opens up, so it pivots. So I make sure the first keyframe is selected, and I go to Modify, Shape, Add Shape Hint. This little red circle shows up with the letter A on it, showing me that this is my first shape hint. And I'm just going to click and drag and have it snap to the corner of this card. On the second keyframe, I'll do the same. I'll bring the little A and I'll drag it up to the corner so it snaps to the corner of that pixel on the card. And now you'll see it turns green on the second keyframe and it's yellow on the first keyframe, showing me that it is locked into place. And now you'll see that although I have some weird things happening, that pixel that I selected is remaining in place. So not a problem, we'll just go ahead and add another shape hint. Go back to Modify, Shape, Add Shape Hint, and that one comes out as a letter B, our second shape hint, and I'll drag that to the top hand corner here. Right, I want this pixel here on the first keyframe to pivot to the outside pixel here on the second keyframe. I'll drag that little B to the top left hand corner and we'll scrub the timeline to see what we have. Now you see we're getting a little bit closer. The card is kind of opening as we wish. So I'll go back to the first keyframe and add another shape hint. Modify Shape, Add Shape Hint, or Command Shift H if you'd like quick keys. And now we have our third shape hint, C, and I'll grab that one and place it on the right-hand corner of the card. And on the second keyframe, I want that right corner to come all the way to the left, so I'll drag that to the left-hand corner here. And again, we'll scrub the timeline. All right, we're almost there. Looks like we have one more to add. I always add the shape hints one at a time because sometimes two is enough. So again, we'll click on the first keyframe and we'll go to Modify, Shape, Add Shape Hint, and we'll take our fourth shape hint, the D, and we'll grab it and snap it on to the left side of the card. And on the last keyframe, I'll bring that D and snap it here so that this pixel pivots back and forth as well. And now we have the card opening and closing. Neat, huh? What's really nice about these shape tweens is they don't just tween the shape, they can also tween the color. So if the card was actually to open, the inside of the card would be dark, and as the card opened, the light would shine in. So I'm going to turn off the first layer here, the top of the card. And on the bottom card, I'm going to set the first keyframe here so that the card is black. And then I'm going to add another keyframe and I'll make that maybe a light yellow. Okay, so now I have two ungrouped keyframes and I'll right click in between to create a shape tween. And now we see that it tweens from black to a light yellow. So if I turn on the top layer, if I press play, I can see it open and the inside gets brighter. It's always good to have different tools in your toolkit, and I'm looking forward to see what you guys can create. Have fun. I hope you enjoyed this Getting Started series with Adobe Animate. My name is Mark, and I hope to see you again soon. Thanks for watching, and happy animating. Keep on moving, don't stop, yo! Keep on moving.